Welcome to the town of Waukesha, special meeting Tuesday, March 18th, beginning at 11:01. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'll call the roll. Supervisor Bansky.
Here.
Supervisor Wolf.
Here.
Supervisor Laska.
Here.
Supervisor Fisher.
Here.
And Chairman Merrick is present, as well as Town Attorney Macy. We have complied with the requirements of the open meetings law. The agenda was posted on March 17th, 2014. We can begin with citizens' comments.
Should I come to the microphone?
Sure. Okay. March 17th.
Sandy Hahn, West 230, South 3827, Milky Way Road in the town of Waukesha. I'm just hoping that coming up soon we will have an apology to Mr. Laska for the false accusations that were levied against him at the last meeting, that he withheld documents, which it seems he did do. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. And we'll move on. Current business is discussion and possible action on the town clerk treasurer position. Last week, Friday, just after 4 p.m., clerk treasurer O'Brien emailed her resignation to us all. We now need to take a step to have a deputized clerk in the office, specifically with regards to the election, as the statute reads that a staff member of the deputized clerk can accept ballots. And so we need to appoint somebody. I've spoke with Aaron. Aaron is willing to, on a short-term basis, accept that appointment, and then we can swear her in after the meeting while we search for a permanent replacement.
I think we need to give a little bit of background just so there is no concerns. I was briefing a couple of members, Mr. Chairman, before you came in, and Mr. Fisher came in when we didn't have a quorum present in the room, that over the weekend there was work done by many of you to try to make sure at 8 o'clock on Monday morning we were meeting the statutory requirements of allowing the absentee ballots. This would not have been as big a problem had we not had that. And somebody jumped on it right away, realized we had that issue to deal with, and made sure. After going back and forth and trying to decide how we could fulfill that obligation, we remembered that we have poll workers and we have a chief election official. It was found that she was qualified to be the one who could be in the office, it's my understanding, and she has been here ever since during the statutory period of time that people could come in and ask for an absentee ballot. So you are in full compliance with the election law to the best of everyone's knowledge, and I want to make sure that the public is well aware of that fact, that there has been no gaps and no issues or no problems. Today, as your chairman has indicated, the special meeting was called so that she doesn't have to be the only one who can be here the entire time. You need to, and again, if the prior clerks had appointed a deputy clerk, we wouldn't need to be here, because then the deputy clerk treasurers would be responsible for taking care of the situation. And so, but we are in a posture where we have a staff person, we have the chief election person, we don't have a clerk, and we don't have any deputy clerks. That's my understanding. So the purpose today is to appoint a clerk treasurer to perform the statutory duties on a temporary, at least it's been reported, and she's available to come in if you have questions for her. I asked her if she wanted to come in. She's got lots going on to cover the counter and stuff, but she said she would step in and answer any questions that the board members would have. It's my understanding she is not looking for the full-time position. That's correct?
Permanent position,
Permanent
yes.
position, but she would fulfill the obligations until the position is filled?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and I again want to reassure everybody that the actual elections, the clerks turn the election over to their poll workers and their election officials on election day. They do all kinds of stuff to get the election going, and then they turn it over. And some clerks, when they're on the ballot, when they're running, you have appointed, of course, they're oftentimes not even in the building during an election day. So it's not uncommon that the clerk doesn't run the election. In fact, I think it's pretty well known that the clerk is the expert and is trained and is available to answer questions or to get them, you know, and we'll make sure prior to the election, I'm sure that someone is available, you know, an expert's available to her if you haven't filled that spot by that time. But at this point, you got to have somebody in here so that the chief election officer doesn't have to be here during all the business hours. Does that make sense? I know I'm jumping around a little bit, I apologize, but it's a little confusing, but I want to make sure that the public is well aware that we do not have a problem. There's been no issues, and that if we appoint someone today, that'll take care of that first step, and then the next step will be whether you're going to hire any office staff to help her, or whether you're going to, put out for RFPs now, or what you're going to do. But the first step, since she's willing to do it, and as legal counsel I'd recommend that you appoint her. You can appoint her to a date certain, which I think we should, and we can talk about what the appropriate date is, and that's a policy decision you have to make. You can appoint her till, a set meeting date or something like that. But you should always appoint her for a date certain. It's up to 3 years. Any time period up to 3 years. Now, nobody's looking for 3 years. I'm just telling you what the statute says. Can I answer any questions?
Would there be any issue with us appointing her to a date certain of, say, May 1st, unless a qualified replacement is found prior to that date?
The only problem with that is there is some confusion, and she could just hold on until May 1st, and that person could take over May 1st. So, I think that does make sort of a confusing motion. She can always resign if there's a qualified person, before the May 1st, and then that person could take over. So.
Now, can she resign and go back to her original position?
Yes. Okay. And the new clerk, when you hire a new clerk, can appoint her the deputy at that time also.
Mr. Chairman, I will move to appoint Erin Baudo as the interim full-time clerk treasurer for the town of Waukesha, effective immediately and until May 1st, 2014, and I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Just have a point of clarification. Under the law, we don't know what interim means. So if we could not use that word,
Just drop that word out.
if no one has an objection, I think we know the intent, but there are, I won't go into it, but there are reasons we don't use acting or interim. She is the statutory person.
How do you, Attorney Macy, reconcile the town ordinance that requires the appointment of the clerk to be issued a 3-year contract?
I wasn't aware of that. Let me pull it up, please.
Do you have the ordinance number?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Do you know what title it's in?
I think it's either 2 or 3.
Chapter 4, town officers, employees. Do we think that might be what it is? I don't know if faster we need. 247 is clerk, for anyone following along. the statute reads, or the ordinance reads as you stated, the town clerk / treasurer shall, in accordance with the authority granted the town board pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 60.31E, the town board shall appoint a town clerk / treasurer who shall serve for a term of 3 years.
Does past practice come into play at all?
It can, but it generally doesn't supersede the ordinance. And then the question is whether the state statute can really, whether your ordinance can really supersede the state statute.
According to the Towns Association, when I spoke with Attorney Macy yesterday, he said that the statute, the way that the Towns Association interpret the statute is that the clerk can serve for a maximum contract of 3 years or any period less than that.
Yeah, that's the state of the statute. And when I talked to you on the phone, I said I couldn't remember if there was a 1-year minimum or a 6-month minimum, and you said you confirmed with them that there was no minimum under the state statute. Now, if you were a village or a city, you can't change a state statute without a charter ordinance, okay? Because the state statute trumps local ordinance. The towns, it's a little bit different because you don't have home rule and you don't have charter ordinances. So there's still a question in the law. I would think to get over this hurdle, we would call her in and just say, it's per the ordinance, we have to appoint you for 3 years, but it's our understanding that you're amenable to resigning at such time as, you know, a replacement's found. And I think if she assured us of that fact, that might give you some comfort.
Question, and not to complicate the issue, but I believe the communication that we received from Clerk Treasurer O'Brien via email on Friday afternoon, when she announced that she was departing immediately, I don't know if she said a specific reference, but said that town ordinances, according to town ordinances, she was basically serving at will. I mean, I guess you're going to take this the next step. Is she still under contract to us for 2 years and 11 months? I mean, I try to reconcile that, and that doesn't make a bit of sense to me.
I don't think she mentioned ordinance. I think rather she said the employee handbook stated that she was an actual employee, so those two are in conflict with each other.
Well, that's similar to what we talked about on Thursday night, where the clerk appoints a deputy clerk treasurers, but you hire them. So you always have employment law versus the state law on appointments, you know. So, but that's a good point. Your motion is to appoint her, okay? But we can enter into a contract with her only till May 1st. So she would be appointed for 3 years, but she wouldn't be paid after May 1st for that position. Because, I mean, that wouldn't be illegal, and that's the way we could deal with the employment issue versus the appointment issue.
Yep.
So she would be appointed, and we'd have to modify the motion, the maker in the second, to appoint her to the clerk treasurer's position and enter into a contract for her to serve in that until May 1st. Does that work with everybody? But let me make sure people are comfortable.
So this person would be getting paid for a time we would have a contract that would appoint her for service without pay? Did I catch that right?
I'm sorry, say it again, please.
If I understood what you said, we would develop a contract with her that would appoint her to the clerk's position for a period. She would get that appointment by ordinance for 3 years. But then we would only compensate her for a reduced time period, but then she'd still have that appointment?
Unless she resigned, yes.
And we could do that?
I'm
asking, I'm
yeah,
not judging.
okay, and we're dealing with, yeah, I understand. I'm trying to think this through, and I'm being similar to what we said the other night. If Jeannie had appointed someone a deputy clerk treasurer, and you had not hired them, they were still the appointed clerk treasurer.
Correct.
They just weren't retained by you, you know, she'd have to pay them or they wouldn't get paid. All right, so I'm trying to always use an example that's a little different than the one we have at hand so that we can relate to it. Because I always try to distinguish between the appointment process and the hiring process. And it came up because, as you said, she resigned saying, I'm an at-will employee, I can resign. She's still appointed for the 3 years, but she's resigned both her employment and as clerk treasurer. Okay? Does that make sense? That's what we assume, that she's resigned from both. So in order to deal with the ordinance that you have, you could just appoint her to the clerk treasurer's position. We could be silent as to the term, since we could argue that the ordinance controls, and that she's hired in that position until May 1st. And we probably should decide what her salary is going to be, if you're giving her any increase in salary for taking on these additional responsibilities. But so I am comfortable with that, if that would be the motion for the mind of the body.
And I'm willing to consent to the modification to my motion accordingly.
Well, I won't be supportive of this action. I like Erin. She is a hardworking person. She has never run an election. She doesn't even, as of yesterday, I asked her if she even knows how to test the machines. She doesn't know how to test the machines. She doesn't know how to do the end of night activities. She is a rookie at best in this area. She has a stated fear of our financial system. This is a person that doesn't want the position on a full-time basis because she's acknowledged, I think, to herself that she doesn't have the skill set to fulfill the needs of this position. And I have an alternative to this solution who could be here this afternoon.
To be sure, Joe, we are not appointing her to run the election. This is purely, the state statute says we have to have somebody deputized in the town hall and their staff can receive ballots. That she is not running the election. That is the only way that she has agreed to accept the interim deputization.
There's a distinguishment there, but she certainly has, as clerk, she would have purposeful described duties prior to the election and at the conclusion of the election to certify the vote, something that she has never participated in, is unknowledgeable of, and it seems foolish to put a person who does not want that position for a full-time, long-term commitment, who is willing to be a stand-up person and just stop the bleeding. I commend her for that, but we are putting a person in a position where she does not have the tools to be successful, and she will most likely try her hardest, but I fear that she won't be successful, given that you already have no support system staff in the office. And then you put a person who has no knowledge in place when we can alternatively put in somebody with vast knowledge who's able to come in this afternoon and immediately impact the situation that's in our office, both from an electoral position as well as from a financial aspect of it. There's absolutely no way I can look at a town resident and say that this is a wise choice, because it's simply not.
Well, who's your mystery solution?
Kathy Nickolaus would be willing to be here this afternoon. She is, we all know who she is, vast amount of experience, and she will be able to be here this afternoon, and she will be able to be here on Friday. She had prior plans for Wednesday and Thursday that she could not change, but she would assume duties today, again, be here Friday morning and start her full-time position. She is as well willing to operate under a contract like Attorney Macy has described, where she will come in for a prescribed period of time, be that May 1st, be that April 31st. She thought that it would be prudent to put a 1-month term together because of the duties of the clerk after the election. And that's the only thing that I'll support today.
Well, she talked to me also after the dinner on Friday night, and she indicated to me though, and I just want to verify what she said to you, and I respect that that's the only thing you're going to support. I just want to say that to me, she said she wouldn't care if she was the office of assistant or she was a deputy. She was willing to help out in any capacity. She didn't need to be named the clerk treasurer.
I will agree with you that that was her original position. I'm not even saying that her position has in fact changed. What her presentation to me was, she had a concern about what by title, from the legal side, she would be able to do if she was not appointed clerk treasurer. And if those were described to her, she would, if we wanted to bring her in just to do the election aspect of that position as a deputy clerk, that is all she would do, and she would not be willing to be an asset to Erin in other ways, which is fair to her. She has a talent and a skill set. She's willing to help train Erin in the other aspects that Erin has not been trained in. When I approached Erin with this yesterday, and Betty Paget, they both seemed, and they're here, we can bring them in, they can speak for themselves, but they were both quite elated with this option. Comments like, we would love to work with her, is what they've said to me. And again, they're here, we can bring them in. And to me, that puts the town in the best light. It gives Erin an asset to help her learn the job, whether that be for 30 days or 45 days, or if at the next, after the election, if that board decides to take a different path or head down using Kathy as a more permanent cure to this position, that'll be that board's decision. So there is I think, quite a viable option in front of the board that the office not only supports, but emphatically supported, in my opinion, and that's the only one that I'll support.
So you want the person that's responsible for 2 messed up elections in the county of Waukesha to run our election?
You and myself and Attorney Macy talked about this. I disagree with the representation that she messed up your election, John, in Berlin, that was done.
No, it's not my election. No, with the last 2 county elections, Joe, that she was involved in.
You can decide to badger her. And
I'm not badgering anybody. I asked you a specific question.
I'm going to merely state, regardless of what went on at the county level where she was handling a much larger scenario, this is a town election, a singular site. To say that she has any impediment to being effective in the execution of our clerk treasurer position is a disingenuous comment. She's well qualified, very well qualified, and she can handle this position easily.
Well, unless there's further comment, we've got a motion on the floor that we should vote on and then move forward.
I just want to make sure we understand all the options if we could. I mean, you said, and I respect that the only one that you would support is if Kathy Nickolaus was named the clerk treasurer. And there are pros and cons to all of these, and we can talk through them, but I'm not going to belabor them if that's not the mind of the body, okay? Okay. But there is the option that you can appoint Erin the clerk treasurer, and she can immediately appoint Kathy Nickolaus. So then you have 2 people. who are doing the duties and responsible for the duties, and we're not sitting out there, you know. And similarly, Kathy Nickolaus can appoint Aaron as the deputy clerk treasurer, that's true. But it seems to me if you're gonna bring in an outsider that some people haven't even talked to point them to the clerk treasurer position, do we have to have them in here and be interviewed? I don't know.
She's willing to be here this afternoon, and if the board wants to take a timeout and reconvene when she gets here, if that's an option for us, there's no problem. I think it would be, I think pulling the wool over people's eyes to try to pretend that we could appoint, I mean, factually, we could appoint Aaron as a clerk treasurer, and we could appoint a deputy clerk treasurer in Kathy, but, so now we'll have the subordinate directing the superior on what to do, how to do it. For me, I think we'd be doing something for a posture reason, not for a legitimate reason. Clearly, she would be the one that would be directing traffic. And I see no reason to call a sheep a lamb. I mean, it's a sheep. Call it what it is. She'd be the one in charge. Aaron would be subordinate to it in practicality and knowledge. And why not set it the way it should be?
I guess Supervisor Bansky, a real simple question, following along to what you had laid out in the question of Attorney Macy to you. Would you support appointing Aaron Baudo to be the town clerk treasurer? And then even though it would be her decision, as I understand it, so support isn't necessarily the right word, but if she were to then deputize or appoint Kathy Nickolaus for the purpose of assistance with the election, would you or would you not support that?
I will not support that.
Okay, thank you.
And with the option I just heard, I will support Joe. I have been in conversation a number of times with Erin, and she has said she does not want to do the clerk treasurer. She does not want anything to do with the money end of it. And with the option of having somebody in here that has the experience and the background in what we're looking for, especially in a willing to come in on a temporary basis, I will support that.
Well, we've got a motion on the floor that we should vote on.
And who seconded it? I'm sorry, I just.
Second it.
Thank you.
No.
Yeah.
The initial motion?
Yes.
He seconded the initial
motion.
And I apologize, I just didn't write it down. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Seconded your friendly change amendment has no second.
Okay, so then we're back to the original motion. You're unwilling to second the friendly amendment, Larry?
I seconded the first motion.
Yes, and then there was a friendly amendment with regards to.
second this, I will not second this amended.
Just second it so we can move on.
Then I will second that, and we can take a quick vote and move on.
The motion is to appoint Erin Bodo to the position of clerk treasurer and hire her to the position until May 1st. Is that correct, Mr. Fisher? Is that your motion?
Yes.
And that's the second?
Yes.
Just for the record, so we know what the motion is. Okay?
We'll take a roll call vote. Supervisor Bansky?
No.
Supervisor Wolf?
No.
Supervisor Laska?
Oh.
Supervisor Fisher?
Yes.
And Chairman Merrick is a yes. Motion fails.
I'm ready.
Can we go into a closed session?
No, we did not give notice of the closed session.
If we're discussing salaries in the middle of a meeting of an individual, do we have?
Well, I know that there is a exception to the open meetings law that says if you were not aware of the potentiality of a closed session, if the body's been properly convened. But I would have a hard time saying that we didn't know that we might have to talk about salary. And so and the Attorney General has really frowned upon going into closed session if we haven't gotten notice. So, I mean, I think we just have to, I was going to suggest, if that's where you're going, that any motion say what the salary was going to be, and you could just say at the same level that, you know, the prior clerk was at, if you want, or, you know, that would be the simplest way. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but if you were to make a motion that says, you know, I hereby move to appoint Kathy Nickolaus as the town clerk treasurer and authorize that she be hired till May 1st at the same salary rate as the prior clerk, that would be a concise motion. And I'm not telling you to make that motion, but I'm giving it as an example.
It sounds like you've negotiated his salary already, Mr. Mansky?
I haven't negotiated with her at all. I think that would be overstepping my duty. I know she had told me what she wants as a salary for the service, but that's her number, not a negotiation. There was zero back and forth on that issue.
What's the number?
$5,600 on a monthly basis, period of 30 days. So if we were going outside of a 30-day window, we would have to come up with a prorated number. I think what we probably would do is need to calculate out, based on an annual rate, breaking that backwards into a per hour rate, and then have her fill in a timesheet and generate a time card for it. I think that's the only way to do it, in my mind, for a short-term number. The $5,600 that she mentioned to me equates to a $67,200 annual salary. Which breaks her out to 32.308 per hour. My motion would be to appoint Kathy Nickolaus as town clerk and treasurer at a rate per hour of $32.30.8 per hour for a period to terminate on May 1st.
I'll second.
Okay. That is something that I will not support. Most of the people in this room have never met her. And you are giving carte blanche to somebody that we've never interviewed, that the people in this board don't know. And there's no way I'm going to support that.
My comments would be much the same. We are, in my judgment, plowing new and unprecedented ground for the town of Waukesha. By proposing to hire somebody for an important position that at least some of us have never met, have never talked to. That makes no sense to me at all, so I cannot support your motion.
Attorney Macy, with the motion on the floor, is it allowable for us to allow her time to travel here so that the board can say hello to Kathy and ask her whatever questions they would like to ask her prior to the vote?
It's certainly, under parliamentary procedure and other rules, it's certainly not against the law to recess the meeting or adjourn the meeting to a time certain and reconvene for those purposes. I don't know, I guess you should, that answers your question. You can do that is true. Under the open meetings law and under, the meeting has to stay open because you can't adjourn a meeting and then reconvene within 24 hours unless you gave notice on that agenda that you were going to reconvene. And so we can't reconvene, we just have to take a recess and call her in. But if it's not going to make any difference, or if the votes are here, does it serve a purpose, I guess? And I don't know if everybody's available later today, I guess we'd have to see.
Well, I'll speak to that issue here. I have to leave in very short order here because I have a client meeting that has been set up that is very important for a significant period of time. So I have to leave here shortly, and I will not be available the rest of the day today.
Okay,
The question I got is, you're not willing to let her in the clerk position, but you're willing to let, because she'll be in our books without us knowing her, but you're willing to let her come in as a deputy clerk. What is the difference?
To run the election, Larry.
Yeah, but she's still gonna be brought in as a deputy clerk, so what keeps her out of our books, if that's your concern, just because we're hiring her to run the election?
No access.
And how do you prevent somebody having access when they're named deputy clerk?
You don't give them a password.
so is that your sole objection? Because I mean, you've met her before. You've actually
I met her
engaged
once.
with her.
Here's the bottom line, Joe. You've got the votes. Do as you choose. It's your
It's not the
call.
bottom line. We should be working towards a consensus, and if you're just closed-minded and you don't want to
I'm not closed-minded.
discuss through your concerns, then just say so and
You three made huge issue when we're hiring a deputy clerk. Larry, a clerk treasurer, you had to have you insisted on a CPA. Mike, you insisted on a CPA. You wanted some extensive background check done, and now you're willing to hire somebody you've presumably never met.
That was for a
Do as you choose.
That was for a full-time position, not to hire for an emergency position that we're required to have by law to run our election.
And we
There's a big
have,
difference.
and we have the ability to hire that person right here in town hall and satisfy that, and then hire somebody as an assistant to help out Aaron. Do as you choose.
so your preference is to hire an emperor with no clothes, somebody who has no knowledge of the process, no experience in the process, over somebody who has the knowledge and experience. Call the vote.
Roll call vote.
I want to read the motion. Supervisor, I'm sorry anal about this, but if I gotta be the clerk here, I want to make sure I wrote this down and I've stated it on the tape so they can type it out, please. Supervisor Vansky moved to appoint Kathy Nickolaus to the position of town clerk treasurer at a rate of, and you gotta help me out here, and I apologize, because I came up with a slightly different number, but I don't know if you used 2080 when you divided by 67,200.
I did the other, I went 1240. So you used the 28. So
But
yeah,
I know,
30,
I
it
think
comes
you
out
only
to-
work 37.5 a day. I heard on Thursday night, the actual hours are
It
37.
comes out to 32.308
Okay,
cents per hour.
and that's what I thought, 32.308 for a period to terminate on May 1st. Wait, we gotta get the word hire in there for, appoint her to the position, and I'm gonna, if you don't mind, and to hire her at the rate of $32.308 an hour for a period to terminate May 1st, 2014.
Correct. That would be.
Thank you for the courtesy of letting me read that back. I just wanted.
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
To Supervisor Bansky to make a motion, or anyone who seconded, would I be correct to understand if this motion passes, then she, Kathy Nickolaus, would have the authority to appoint anyone that she would want to be a deputy or not to deputize people. That would be her prerogative to do that. And I guess I'm further assuming then with your motion, the intention would be that her purpose here would be much broader than simply running the election 2 weeks from today. Are those correct assumptions or not?
Well, I'm gonna answer the first one because that's a legal question.
Fair.
Yes, the town clerk treasurer has the authority to appoint her deputies. She cannot, unless she pays them out of her own pocket, pay them without your permission. So she would have to bring in any appointment, as your prior clerk did, and ask you to hire them. Okay, she can appoint all she wants, she doesn't have the purse strings unless, my understanding is your procedure is you have not granted to your clerk treasurer the purse strings to pay those people, that they have to bring them in.
Then that would take another meeting of this body.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that one. Now, as for the duties, I will defer to the comments. She would have the statutory duties of a clerk treasurer. The legal answer is she would have the statutory duties of a clerk treasurer. She would have to fulfill those duties. But I don't want to step on, the conversation was more pointed toward the makers in the second of the motion, what they contemplated.
So Joe, my question to you is a practical matter. Mr. Macy has outlined the statutory framework as a practical matter. What have you in mind?
We currently have one human being in the office. We have no candidates available at this time to assist her in her day-to-day operation of the town of Waukesha. The job calls for, requires more than one human being. This isn't, you know, I understand you're trying to frame the question for gotcha moments later, but
On the contrary.
obviously she'd be doing the job of the clerk treasurer.
Yeah. I guess I need to respond. I'm not framing any question for a gotcha moment. I think members of this town board have been in the past, are entitled to in the present, and will in the future, to be able to engage in conversation and discourse and fruitful discussion with other members of the town board. So let's take the gotcha moment stuff and put it in your hip pocket. Thank you.
Anything further?
I'd like to add one more comment. This is a text message from Kathy Nickolaus. My message to her at 11:36, what time can you be at town hall? Her response, when want me? I could leave in about 45 to an hour. My text to her, I believe I'm unable to get a unanimous vote. Fisher and Merrick will oppose. I will have 3-2 majority. Will you please accept? I can't do it. We are not wasting our time. She will not accept because she will not participate in political. So call the vote.
Sure.
Supervisor Laska?
Repeat the motion, please.
Certainly. It was Supervisor Vansky moved and Supervisor Wolf seconded to appoint Kathy Nickolaus to the position of Town Clerk Treasurer and to hire her at the rate of $32.3008 an hour for a period to terminate on May 1st, 2014.
I thank you, and my vote is yes.
Chairman Merrick?
No.
Supervisor Fisher?
No.
Supervisor Vansky?
Yes.
Supervisor Wolf?
Yes.
Motion carries. Oh, you have to say that, I'm sorry.
Motion carries.
Didn't mean to overstep my bounds.
Next, you're fine. Next, we need to come to consensus of what we're going to do to permanently fill that position. We can put out some advertisements on the Clerks Association Network.
I would support that.
I don't think we need a motion for that. Is there any objection to moving forward with that? Hearing none, that's what we'll do. Attorney Macy, any guidance if we don't have a deputy? We have nobody deputized at this point to accept ballots. I think that would put us in some jeopardy. Or am I mistaken?
Well, it's my position that as long as your chief election inspector, according to what your research showed with GAB, were qualified, we're set. So, pardon?
I think we need to have.
Well, the next step is to talk to Kathy Nickolaus and see if she's willing to do the job. She's a personal friend of mine, and if you don't mind, I'll call her and see if if we can talk to her. If no one has an objection to that, I mean, that's all I can do.
I would take a moment of recess and have you call her while we're in session.
I would go with that.
If that's what you, I didn't mean now, in case she says no, I mean, okay, sure.
So why don't we recess for about 10 minutes?
I mean, I'm not saying I can perform any magic, I can just tell her what happened and tell her that I'm here to support her, and we'll make sure that, she gets all the support she needs. I don't believe that just because two people voted no because they had a different position, that anybody here wouldn't give her their full support. I absolutely believe that everybody here, she's been appointed, and she'll get the full support of all the members of the board.
Agreed.
And I will tell her that. And I'll tell her that all of you agreed to that. That just because for personal reasons you thought you would go a different route, she'd still be here, she still would have been here, it just would have been in a different capacity. But the majority felt this was the better capacity. So it's not that anybody's opposed to her. I didn't hear anybody opposed to her if she was the office person or she was the deputy. And that's what I was going to explain to her, if no one has a problem with my explaining that to her.
I think that's fine.
I don't want to misrepresent anything, but, Okay.
Recess for about 10 minutes?